Welcome to the Sober and Happy podcast, where we talk about all things recovery related, how to navigate the challenges that we'll face along the way on our journey towards our best lives, and how we could go from living a life of simply just being sober to a life where we are both sober and happy. This week we'll talk about one of the most elusive things in the universe, something we have searched long and hard for but have never had concrete evidence that it exists. Now, I'm not talking about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, or UFOs. I'm talking about discovering an alcoholic who has found a way to control their drinking and finally be able to drink like a normal person. I know at some point most of us have wondered if we might be able to crack the code and learn how to drink normally. But is it possible? Is there a way? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So buckle up. This is going to be a great episode. Welcome back. Now, I know the comparison to Bigfoot in the intro might seem a little ridiculous, but ask yourself, do you know one person who has had a significant problem with alcohol, has successfully been able to dial it back and drink like a normal person for any sustained period of time? I know that I don't, but that didn't stop me from trying to be the first. You may have heard people say that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I think the alcoholic version of that is attempting to try controlled drinking over and over again and expecting a different result. All we have to do is look back on our past to see that we can't control our drinking. But why do we keep trying? And more importantly, why do we keep somehow convincing ourselves that it's possible? The biggest reason for me was the fact that at some point alcohol did an amazing job at making me feel better. And when something used to be really good, it's very hard to admit that things have changed and accept that we're never going to go back to that. It's the same reason people stay in relationships that were amazing in the beginning, but had turned bad long ago, but we stay because it used to feel so good. We always convince ourselves that the moment to returning to that magic of the beginning is just around the corner. The problem is, that moment we keep looking for never comes. I always convinced myself that if I could just get back to some point of my drinking that I would be fine. But as my drinking got worse, that bar of what was acceptable or normal seemed to change too. Essentially, my desire to convince myself that I could drink like a normal person was so strong that I kept moving the bar of what I considered moderation. At first, it was a set number of drinks or only drinking certain days of the week. When that wasn't possible, I kept looking at past points of my drinking when the consequences were not as bad as they were at that moment and convinced myself if I could just get back to that point, I would somehow be in control. And then, of course, there was that one time that I was able to do it, and I kept looking back at that as proof that it is possible. And I'm not talking about a time when I white-knuckled through a miserable night after a self-imposed limit of one drink an hour. I'm talking about the one time where I enjoyed an evening while somehow maintaining a light buzz and never crossing that line. I refer to it as that one time because for me it literally was one night of my thousands of nights of drinking. I remember it clearly. I was at a pool hall with some friends and had only a couple of beers so far. A girl I met a couple weeks before and was interested in called me and said she wanted to come join us. At this point in my life, I was still at the point where I thought I could hide my drinking problem, and I definitely wanted to hide it from her. So I decided to limit myself to 2 beers an hour while I was hanging out with her. I had tried this several times before without success, but for that night, the desire to impress this girl was strong enough to not give in to the cravings of wanting to drink more. And the evening went amazing. I was witty, I was charming, and she seemed to be really into me. We had a great time. I walked her out to her car, and I got that magical first kiss. Now, as amazing as that moment was, the second I walked back into the pool hall, my first thought was, thank God, now I could drink like I want. I walked up to the bar, ordered another beer and a double shot, and I was back to normal. So why on that one evening was I able to control my drinking and still enjoy my night? That's because in that one night, that hole I filled with alcohol was replaced by the company and attention of a woman that I was very much into. This girl was way out of my league at that point of my life. On the look scale, she definitely scored a few notches above me. But she also was very successful, had an amazing personality, and most importantly, she was into me. If you look at many of the reasons that I drank, she temporarily defused those. I was insecure, and being in a pool hall full of people and having her there with me, for that moment, I felt confident. I never felt like enough, but if a girl who was beautiful, successful, and altogether an amazing person was into me, it finally made me feel like enough. This is common with people who jump into relationships when they first get sober. The attention from the other person often does a sufficient job of filling that hole for a time. But usually, the relationship ends and then the person relapses. Not just from the pain of the breakup, but because that hole that was temporarily filled is now empty again. Now, for me and that girl, the timeline was much shorter. The next time we went out, I didn't do as good as controlling my drinking and I got a little drunk. Not too obnoxious, but drunk enough that she noticed and mentioned her concern to me the next day. And like any good alcoholic, I told her I had a rough day at work and just needed to blow off some steam and that I don't drink like that regularly. And at that moment, I believed that I could deliver on what I was selling her because I was still convinced that I'd cracked the code on our first date. And with just a little more practice, I could control it in the future. But then on our third date, I got pretty hammered and she let me know that she didn't want to date someone who got that drunk. And my dream girl left my life forever. So why was I not able to repeat the success from that one time? That is a question I pondered throughout my drinking as I tried to replicate it, and I only learned the answer after I got sober and started researching the causes of alcoholism. Now, I have to admit in full transparency, I wasn't researching this to understand alcoholism better because I wanted to learn more about sobriety and recovery. I still hadn't accepted the fact that I was going to have to stay sober forever, and I was still looking for that magical cure. I had convinced myself that I hadn't figured it out before because I was still drinking and my mind was not clear enough to do the type of thorough research to solve such a complex problem. But now, with a clear mind, I certainly could find the answer, right? Well, here's what I found. A little warning first. I'm going to geek out on you for a little bit, but don't worry if that's not your thing. I'm just going to give a quick scientific explanation. When we consume alcohol, various enzymes in our body break down the alcohol, and the result is a chemical called acetate, which is expelled from our body. People with alcohol use disorder, whether it be full-blown alcoholism or chronic binge drinkers, metabolize alcohol differently. We do not get rid of acetate efficiently, and when acetate remains in our bodies, it creates cravings for more acetate, kind of like a misery likes company thing. So if you think back to a night of drinking, you have a drink, you instantly want more. The more intoxicated you get, the more you crave alcohol. You finally get home, you're barely conscious, yet you stumble to the fridge to grab just one more beer before you go to bed. This pattern happens because of the acetate buildup in your body. With each drink, because of our body's inability to metabolize alcohol effectively, more builds up and the cravings increase with each drink. Let's look at this like water flowing through a strainer in a sink. That is what it looks like for a normal person to metabolize alcohol. The strainer could do its job and the water flows through it without any blockages. Now for us alcoholics, it's more like pouring a milkshake into that strainer. The parts of the milkshake that are already melted go through, but the remainder of the milkshake is going to sit in that strainer until it slowly melts and finally can pass through. What remains in that strainer is what causes the physical craving for alcohol. A normal person could pour one drink an hour through that strainer and not have the physical craving for more alcohol. However, for the alcoholic, the craving kicks in before the first milkshake has melted, so we pour another one in. Now we have a bigger pile of unmelted milkshakes in that strainer, so the cravings get stronger. So we keep pouring more milkshakes into the strainer, and eventually it fills up. That is why that first night that I hung out with that girl, although she was able to fill the emotional hole for the reasons that I drank temporarily, the physical cravings were still building, which is why I ran straight to the bar the second she drove out of the parking lot. Here's the thing about this. Some people are born with the inability to process alcohol effectively. You see this with certain ethnicities like Native Americans or Alaskan Natives who are genetically predisposed to this condition. It is also one of the reasons you might see alcoholism run in families even when two siblings might have been raised in completely different environments. However, you don't have to be born an alcoholic to become one. You could work really hard at it too. The more you drink, the more you damage the organs that metabolize alcohol. That is one of the reasons why alcoholism is progressive. Over time, as we damage our pancreas, kidneys, and liver, our ability to process alcohol decreases, so the cravings when we drink also increase. Our organs also function less effectively as we age, so time is against us too. That is why you could see someone who quits drinking for 10 years, decides to have one drink, and they quickly end up worse than they were 10 years before. Now, I started this story by admitting that I went on a quest to find the magical solution for drinking normally, but I must admit, as hard as I looked, I could not find one. And trust me, I was desperate at that time in my life, so if science or medicine had discovered one, I would have found evidence of that study. So if you clicked on this episode hoping to find the secret to being able to finally control your drinking and to drink like a normal person, I hate to disappoint you. However, not all is lost. When I finally gave up on my quest to find the holy grail of moderation, something else happened. The internal battle of whether I could drink normally ended. I finally accepted it. And once we accept our condition, we could finally decide to treat it. All of that energy I was wasting on trying to figure out a way to still drink was now available to begin the work necessary to heal myself and grow so that I could learn to enjoy life without needing to numb myself. My true growth started at that moment of acceptance. It may have not been what I was looking for when I began my quest, but it was exactly what I needed. If you're still at the point of your journey where you're still battling the notion that you too might be able to one day figure it out, you don't have to dig through medical studies like I did. You only need to take an honest look at your past experiences and you will find the proof on whether or not you could control your drinking. And not that one time either. Look for the pattern. And once you discover it, like me, with acceptance will come a peace that only comes when we decide to stop fighting a battle that we cannot win. And then you too can redirect that energy and begin creating a life that alcohol always promised, but had never been able to deliver. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I hope you're enjoying this podcast. Here's your weekly challenge. I want you to pick something you've been procrastinating doing and do it this week. Maybe it's facing a fear. Maybe it's finally taking the first step towards chasing that big dream. Maybe it's quitting that nagging habit you know is no longer serving you. Or maybe it's just finally taking a day off to spoil yourself. Whatever it is, don't put it off another week. Pick a day, commit to yourself, and do it. That is my challenge for you from this episode. New episodes come out each Friday, so I look forward to connecting with you next week. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Keep living sober and happy.